Christ will force that entity out. Now, where does it go? We just don't say go away. We bind it with the cross of Christ. And then Christ judges that demon. In the scriptures, it's very clear. The demons, the rebellious angels, there is no salvation for them. Why? Because their clarity of free will is much higher than ours, and therefore their clarity of will can only be, though they have free will, they know who God is. The demons know, and the Eucharist is present, because the reaction is ferocious. And being able to provide the Eucharist for somebody who's also dealing with a demonic entity can be very, very difficult. So when we do these deliverance sessions, we go up a hierarchy. We get them back into the rhythm of a faith life, a prayer life, a moral life, a sacramental life. And then we use deliverance for a period of time, and it really is kind of my judgment and the judgment of the team to decide whether or not we have to put the metal to the pedal and ask the local bishop to permit us to do a formal exorcism. But that's when everything else has failed. Now, in the discernment as well, it isn't just me and the prayer team. I have a set of professionals. So when someone comes in and they're hearing things or seeing things or they're going through depression, one of the questions you ask is, have you ever been under the care of a psychologist or a psychiatrist? Do you have any history of mental health issues? Well, if they do, that might be their problem. It may not be because they're hearing things and seeing things that automatically means it's demonic. And I told people that. I said, we have to do due diligence. So I have a medical doctor and a clinician and a psychiatrist, all practicing Catholics, all who believe in the existence of Satan. The reason that we want practicing Catholics is because we want the professionals to be looking through the same optic of faith as we are. But you need to use medical science and the social sciences to help discern out what is the root cause. Because you don't want to end up performing an exorcism on somebody who doesn't need one, because you can do incredible psychological damage. And so when we do these sessions, they can take a year, they can take a couple of years. It all depends. It depends how long the infestation has been. It depends on how powerful the demons are. And it also depends on how much this person wants to get rid of this stuff. We've had people sometimes who've been in a what's the right word I'm looking for? Sorry, hold on a second. Oh, fudge. I hate it when I lose. I lost my train of thought. They've been in conflict with themselves. And I said, what would prevent you from wanting this gone? Well, I get a lot of comfort from being able to listen to what they have to say. And I said, well, then you need to go, and you need to come back when you're ready to be free. Because God doesn't interfere in free will. Now, that doesn't happen a lot, but there have been times when they've decided they like sometimes the attention. They like sometimes the benefit. Because there can be a benefit for a time. Unfortunately, they live delusionally that the demon is always going to win without Christ. If without Christ, we're done. With Christ, we win. And Christ has won for us. It's been transformational for my priesthood. I have a completely different understanding of why I'm a priest now than I did 10 years ago. Not that I didn't understand, but it's just deeper. And you see the cosmic battle up close. And so for all of us, it's a battle between Satan and God over souls. The war is over. The battles go on. Why does God give Satan boundaries? He does give him boundaries. Why does he even give him any boundaries? Because he wants us to decide. He wants us to have a clarity of choice. Because he respects our human nature enough to respect our free will. And in the cross, it is where we are saved. And it is in the Eucharist and the other sacraments of the church that flow out of our baptism. That we have the armor that we need to live lives that are wholesome, that are life-giving, and that have a vision of a future. Thank you. I didn't mean to talk so long. I'll take questions till 8:30. I mean, I told Father Joseph, I mean, I'm not going to just race out of here. I don't do that. Plus, that's not possible. This lady over here, please. Could you just stand up and then state your question?
Thank you, Father. We know Satan's a big liar. Can a person wear a crucifix and be attached in any way?
Question is, can a person have a demonic attachment, wear a crucifix at the same time? I would say my personal experience, yes. I think it depends. It depends on how strong the demonic is. I would say more likely than not they would have some difficulty. But I've had people come where they've had a scapular around their neck or a necklace with a cross. But they've also had an attachment. It certainly wouldn't be possible with a possession. But with a lesser degree, it's not impossible. Yes?
Does the Archbishop or Archbishop take the course that you do as well? If they haven't taken the course, how do they know what you're up to?
Yes, good question. The question is, if I've taken the course, has the bishop taken the course? The answer is no. Now let me say this with regards not just to my bishop, but to the bishops. When I was made exorcist in 2005, there was only 14 exorcists known in the country. After the movie came out, from 2011 to the present time, we have quintupled the number of known exorcists in the country. We now have established a school of exorcism, which was started just 2 years ago at Mundelein Seminary, the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I happen to be on the board of the seminary, the board of the School of Exorcism. So what has happened, more and more bishops, like how I became exorcist, which I really didn't tell you about. In 2004, John Paul issued the mandate. In 2005, our Bishop McGraw, was getting some requests, which I didn't know about exorcism. So he approached my very dearest, closest priest friend, and we're in the same Music Caritas group, and he would have been a perfect choice for this. And after discernment, he decided not to do it. And he told us at the support group meeting, I told the bishop no. I just naively spoke up and said, I could do that. I didn't know what I was saying yes to. So the bishop then said, well, you're going to Rome. It was providential. I was going to Rome. I had time. And he said, there's a course you can take, which I took. But in the course, it's like anything else. You can be taught about this stuff, but then you have to go do it. So early in the course, there were three Americans in the course of 60 people. All the priests were Italian. No bishops. There were three Americans. There were 60 people. All the priests were Italian except me and this other big burly Franciscan from Vermont, who unfortunately has since died. And all the nuns were from Africa. And it was a course that they had just started the 6 months before I took it. Now they teach it every year. But they were teaching it over a course of months. And so when the course was being taught, this other American was apprenticing under an 85-year-old priest at a church called La Scala Santa, which is next to St. John Lateran Basilica. It's where the holy stairs that St. Helen brought back from Jerusalem that allegedly Jesus walked up facing Pontius Pilate. So this priest was in there, and Father Johannes was apprenticing. So Johannes would come to class, and he would tell us all these experiences. And I remember saying to Matt Ballio, who I didn't know from SWAT, who wrote the book, I gotta go find somebody to work under. So I did, long story short, found Father Carmen, not easy, and started working with him 3 days a week. So then when I came home, when the bishop came over for the installation of Cardinal LeVay to become a cardinal. So PJ, that's his nickname, PJ McGraw, says to me, well, kind of cynically, well, how many exorcists have you seen? I said, I've seen about 80. He was stunned. And so I began to sort of catechize him a little bit. And so after I came home, and then the book came out. When the book came out in '09, then other priests started calling me saying, I've just been appointed, what do I do? So I started having, and I've had guys, I've had other exorcists from other dioceses around the United States, and sometimes whole teams come to Sacred Heart for 3 or 4 days at a crack and observe. Because that's the only way we're going to learn. Because you can be taught about this ministry, but until you actually function in this ministry, very difficult. Because the ritual itself, which is now being revised, is being translated in English. It's actually sitting on the prefect's desk in Rome as I speak in English. The ritual doesn't tell you enough as to know what to actually do. It gives you the prayers, but there's a whole, in a sense, protocol that comes with experience. And so I've had lots of conversations with lots of bishops about not only appointing guys, but also becoming more educated themselves. To answer your question, which is a very good question, no. However, no, it's not. But the fact that we have 90 guys in the United States now we have 185 dioceses. We have 90 exorcists. Now that's better than we were 6 years ago, because we started largely from almost zero. And in just a few short years, because there's a lot of bishops who are getting a lot of calls. I get calls from bishops saying, I don't know what to do. I said, you need to appoint somebody first. And there are bishops, most of the bishops believe, but there are a few, they're still skeptical. And I said, come see what I do. You won't be, I promise. So, good question. Yes, over here.
Can you talk a little bit more about the generational curses? I sort of alluded to it, but...
I know I kind of covered a lot of stuff. The question has to do with generational curses. Generational curses are they're inherited. So, I'll give you a good example. This is a real life story. Person comes in, has had a lot of problems for a long time, problems with depression, then these problems become, psychosis, or they've had stomach problems for a long time, or other physical issues. They've been to doctors, nobody can find, they've had all kinds of tests, nothing. So they're desperate. All these people are desperate. So they come to me, and we start asking and poking around and doing a lot of discernment. And then I'll say, well, tell me about, has anybody in your bloodline, was your mother or father, were they ever involved in witchcraft, black magic, white magic, the black arts, crystals, anything like that? Oh yeah, my grandmother was a witch. Tell me about what grandma did. Now, we prayed over a guy on Friday night. Now, this is real life. Prayed over a guy on Friday night. His grandmother, he grew up in Mexico. His grandmother regularly took him to a curandero, which if you don't know what that is, that's a Spanish word for witch. They're medicine people, but they're into witchcraft. She took him regularly. And that, in a sense, was the doorway for him to then eventually get sicker because his father was a Rosicrucian who put a curse on the whole family. And nobody in his family has been well all of their adult life. They've all had stomach problems, they've all had mental problems, 2 of the 4 have never married. He couldn't bear kids naturally. He had to adopt his children. His sister has 1 child, but they've all suffered. But the father told them, he put the curse on them. But it goes back to grandma. Now sometimes it can go back further. Sometimes we don't know. It's very seldom do people know their great-great-grandparents, but sometimes people will pass traditional lore down from one generation to another, and they'll know. And so that's where the generational curses come from. They come from people being involved in this kind of behavior. and it can be passed from one generation to the next. Is that helpful? Okay. Let me get the guy in the back.
Sir, my father just passed away yesterday.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Thank you. He married a woman 42 years ago, and I would say that within 7 years, our family was just decimated. I can't even tell you what happened, but this woman was my stepmother, and I do believe that there was a demonic presence attached to her. It still is. You could say if you spoke with her, it's borderline personality disorder, but if you talk to her a little deeper, you know that there's something else going on. Now, I think during the 70s, he married her in 74. She was very gregarious, and she experimented with a lot of things. She was always of an ill temper and incredibly mean. And the damage she did, not just to me, but just to so many other people, it was almost as if she could will someone's demise. Within 3 years, I had aunts that were pillars of the family die. My grandmother went crazy. My grandfather died on the spot. Just the family, just until he married her. He'd been married to my mother for 7 years. When he divorced, even then, we still had a robust family. I'm talking about my father's side. It was robust. It was healthy. I mean, I'm Catholic. I always was Catholic, but they were Baptist, but they were church going and God fearing, and they walked a straight line. And when this woman came into our family, you couldn't recognize it 10 years later. And she was a traditional Schadenfreude. She just really took great pleasure and joy in other people's suffering, almost as if it was like sampling a good meal. You know, when she would see someone suffering, or if she had done something to somebody. And I was wondering, can somebody marry somebody? It was almost like my father was a captive of this person, and she was his jailer. And just to have seen my father turn his back on me and other people because he was bewitched by this person, is that possible?
Yes. I'm listening to what you're saying. I can't prove that she did something to him, but she could have. If she was playing around, I don't know how many of you heard all the, basically, this man's dad died yesterday. I'm very, very sorry for your loss. And the woman that this man's dad married, they were married for 42 years, basically divided the family and caused the family to be disintegrated and all kinds of things to happen. It is possible, especially if she was involved in witchcraft. She may have put a spell on him. Very, very often, and again, I'm not saying this absolutely happened, demons are passed.
Can I just one little instance? I was just about ready to graduate high school in June of 1982. I came home early from school one day because the school days were disintegrating and we were about to graduate. And she was at work. And I found my father in the corner. My father's about 2 inches taller than I am. And he was almost a 300-pound man, a laborer, a burly man, in the corner, crying. And I said, Dad, oh my God, you're 17 years old, you're seeing your father on his knees in a corner crying, we're going, what's going on? And it was destabilizing. I said, Dad, what's going on? And he said, I want to divorce Ruth and I don't know how. And he was just, tears were streaming down his face. And then I remembered, kind of not long after that, he wanted to wish the incident away, and as if I never saw it. Sometimes people get under the weather or something like that, and tried to make me not think about it or remember it. But I always remembered that because I'd never seen my father cry, ever. And when I saw that, he didn't even know I was in the house until I touched him, and then he just reacted. And then he turns to my face, and the tears are streaming in his face. I want to divorce Ruth, but I don't know how. And at that moment, I knew he was a captive of something.
It's very possible that she could have had something attached and she could have put a spell on him. It's also possible that she could have put a curse possibly on the family. It's not, I can't say for sure, but it's not out of the question given what you told me about the woman's background.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the bloodline? I've talked to you before, and you sent me somewhere here in San Francisco, and I've had experiences with things in our home, and my husband's mother is psychic, tarot, the whole 9 yards, a Latin family, and came from her seeing things, but my children have seen things or feel things, and how do I get them to, they are a very faithful family. We are, my husband is a deacon,
Okay.
and so, you know,
So
we're always offsetting, we've had bishops in the house.
Sure.
that they're-
So is the woman you're talking about, is she a blood relative of you or your
She's
husband?
my husband's mother.
Okay.
And we have no relation.
Gotcha.
There's
And,
also.
and she's got the gifting, but she's used it for the dark side.
Yes.
And your kids now,
And we've severed
Right.
our relationship.
Good.
It's many years
Good.
now.
That's
However-
very appropriate. So the question is, your mother-in-law has gifting that she's used,
And she sends things over.
Right. Okay.
And my kids also see things.
right?
And
And
they're like,
there's not unusual, it's inherited. It comes down through the bloodlines.
right.
The only thing I can encourage you to do, first of all, is reassure your children to use their gifting for the purposes of God's glory in ways that are always holy and wholesome, and to simply make sure that daily you pray against any of those attacks that your mother-in-law may be sending your way. And invoke the Blessed Mother, and invoke Michael and the angels. And whatever your patron saints of your kids are, involve them. Or your patron saint, or your husband's patron saint. Involve them. I do that in deliverance sessions all the time. And honestly, it does work. Mary does show up. Because I've had people say to me, do you see Mary? No, but I smell her. Or I feel her. Do you see St. Michael? I can feel him. Then go to him. So just make sure that you keep your prayer life, the rhythm of your prayer life and your kids' life, keep that strong, and reassure your children not to be afraid. Okay? Just stand back here.
Father Gary, you and your team, do you have any idea or a common idea about where the entry point and the exit point?
We have a common idea of the entrance point.
Entry point and the exit point.
It all depends. No, there is no, I mean, you're always asking, how, first of all, you ask all the discernment questions, and then if there is something preternatural, then you ask it. You ask the demon. The demon has to tell you, because they're legalists. And because I'm the mandated exorcist, they will do all they can not to answer, but eventually they have to answer. One thing I didn't mention, in the rite of, in the solemn rite, you always ask, what is the name of the demon? In the same way that at baptism, the deacon or priest asks the parents, what is the name of the child? Or if the person is old enough to speak for themselves, what is your name? Why do we do that? Not because we don't know their name or not because we forgot their name, because it has everything to do with the biblical call to holiness and the call to be drawn into the light in the absolute reverse way. The demons don't want to go in the light because once they're exposed to the light, they lose their power. So you actually ask, after you've done the discernment, it was through witchcraft, or it was through a curse, or it was through, a medium or whatever, and you're seeing these manifestations, then as you pray, you say, in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, what is your name? How did you get in? You don't have long conversations with them. How did you get in? When are you leaving? What is your name? So they will tell you the entry point. Then you sever the tie. I do lots of tie severings. You sever all these ties. That's why the question you brought up about your mother-in-law. I would encourage you, every day, pray to sever the ties, all the unholy and ungodly ties between You and your mother-in-law and your husband and his mother, all the unholy and godly ties. Do that every day. Because once you sever the ties, you want to isolate the demon. Then once it has no legal right to stay, it has to go. That makes sense?
Father Gary, I would like to make a suggestion about this one, because I know the entry point, but the exit point, I talked to Adam Bly. Blessed Mother revealed us something very special. I studied Hindu, I studied Buddhism, I studied Muslim, and I studied the sacramental that they use. But when I compare the gift of the Blessed Mother about this unique one that she gave us this scapular, that there is one at the back and one at the front. Most of the sacramental that they use, the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Muslim, the shamanism, what they have is just in the front. Now, when I observe things, because nowadays we are in high tech, I learned the entry point, 70% is at the back of the person. Here, at the back of your neck. And the attack is about 70 or 80%. And then I suggest most of the Catholic to wear scapular. That's the reason why Blessed Mother gave us the scapular. That's one of the purpose.
The entry points actually usually come through the senses. The eyes, the ears, the mouth, and the nose. The entry point comes through there.
Adam Bly told me that most likely the exit point is in the mouth.
The exit point is in the mouth. You're absolutely correct. And that's where you see the deliverance. So how do you know when a demon is leaving? You're absolutely correct. The exit point is through the mouth. So there's like what we would consider kind of like a vomiting, a dry heaving. It's called foaming at the mouth. That's absolutely correct. And that's a good thing. And sometimes that will go on for a long period of time. How do you know that the demon is actually completely